So, welcome to the fourth ChaiTime, and I've got a very special guest today to chair the session. So I really appreciate Andy Richards doing this. Andy generally doesn't need an introduction, but he's someone that I've followed in his footsteps somewhat. I like to think that we shared a history at Jesus College, although I was there a few years after him. And then he was leaving PA Consulting as I was joining. And then he started an entrepreneurial career, and so did I. And then he became a sophisticated angel investor, and I followed in route. So I'm kind of following behind Andy Richards, probably about 20 years behind him. However, he's far smarter than me. I'm good looking, so that's okay. So I'd like to hand over to Andy, who will introduce his panels.
Much better looking, much fitter. Oh, that I was younger. Anyway, welcome everyone. It'd be really good to know who's on the line. The format of this is we all talk for a while, and then you all ask questions. The more questions, the better. I'll try and pick up people's questions and pass them around. We'll try and sort of keep it lively. My name's Andy Richards, as Sunil said. I'm a Cambridge Angel founder, serial entrepreneur, biotech, obsessed with the wonders of early stage life science companies and the good that they can do, and the good that all innovation in healthcare can do. So actually, I'm going to run around the rest of the panel and let them introduce themselves. So where are we going to start? We're going to start with Peter.
Hi, thank you, Andy. So my name's Peter Rands. I founded a company called Small Pharma 5 years ago, developing new medicines based on known active ingredients. We initiated our lead project that we're currently raising funds on about a year and a quarter ago, about 15 months ago. And this is a new medicine to treat major depressive disorder based on a psychedelic compound called dimethyltryptamine.
Okay, thank you, Peter. We will come back to all of that a little bit later. Next, Zabi.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me, Sunil and Andy. I'm Sabi, the CEO and one of the co-founders at Turbine, where we're building a stimulated cell that we use to predict how and what drives disease, especially cancer. We've been working with some of the top pharma companies for 3 years now. Initially, we thought that this technology will allow them to run their pipelines better, but over time, we actually realized the best use of the technologies as an end-to-end guiding system about biology, basically, and something that helps you better understand biology from the earliest stage of discovery all the way to even life cycle management. And to prove that thesis, now we've started building our own pipeline, purely guided by the simulations and smart rational web validation along the way. We have a team of 50 based in London, to some extent Cambridge, and also Budapest, Hungary. Thanks for having me.
Sabi, that's great, wonderful. And Ruchi?
Hello, I'm Ruchi. I'm CEO and also founder of StemNovate Limited. So the company is dedicated to microphysiological modeling of human cell response that can be used for drug discovery, more targeted drug discovery, vaccination development, and diagnostics. The main platform that we have is for liver, because it's the main organ for drug metabolism. And for last 2 years, we had Innovate UK grant, and under that, we have done a lot of pharmacogenetic, pharmacokinetic, and dynamic studies. So that helps understanding and drug screening and in vitro toxicology. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruchi. Sarah.
Thanks, Andy. My name is Sarah Howell. I'm the CEO of Aracor. We're a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company. We'd perhaps immodestly say that we have a world-leading formulation technology platform, and we leverage this to develop new improved versions of existing products. So our first therapeutic franchise area for our proprietary pipeline is in diabetes, where we're developing very rapid acting insulins, and we've just expanded out into the anti-infective space. We also partner with many of the world leading pharmaceutical and biotech companies, where again we apply our technologies to their products to develop improved versions for them, and we do this under a technology licensing model.
Sarah, thanks. So Sunil asked me just to give a few words of sort of big stuff to start with, high level stuff, about why healthcare is an interesting place to invest, and innovative healthcare is an interesting place to invest. Of course, you're talking to someone who's somewhat obsessed with investing in innovative healthcare. So maybe I'm not the most objective person in the world, and I'm well known as an optimist. But I know that Sunil is as well, and hopefully some of the rest of you on the call are. But I just thought I'd just cover some of the big fundamentals, because I think it sort of comes. It sort of addresses all the things that these guys are doing, and then we'll come to them each in turn with some questions. So the real reason why innovation in healthcare and life sciences is an exciting place to be is that actually the needs, the unfulfilled needs, the unfulfilled nature of the market is huge, and of course we know that at the moment that there are things that we wish we had, like decent antivirals and vaccine platforms up and running, and testing for new diseases which we simply don't have, and therefore there are always unfulfilled market needs, and the market potential of those are global and they're huge. And what's more, they require to solve them. It's not usually being smart about how you market something, it's being smart about how you invent something. So it needs discovery, and it needs bright minds, and it needs innovation to be able to solve that. And of course, the real thing is that all the large players in the ecosystem, who traditionally all did their own R&D in big, huge, megalithic research centers around the world, have all shifted and are principally now reliant on smaller innovator companies and a whole ecosystem. And they acquire technologies, they partner on technologies, they buy technologies, they buy products, and they buy companies. And that's the fundamental. If you can actually do something that fits in that ecosystem, then those companies will help you, and will help you to monetize the value from what you do. And the value can very much be captured from the innovation itself. And that's because that whole sector has always relied on and respected intellectual property. And so if you've got intellectual property, and you've got data, unique data, and you've got something that's yours, that's proprietary, that they need, rather than trampling all over it, as happens in many other sectors, they will pay, and they know its value. So innovation is captured, and even the smallest company can patent something, and the instinct of even the largest company will be to respect that. And we'll come, and we're very lucky to have Peter, who's an expert in patents on the line, and Peter will tell us some of the things, I hope, later on about why and how patents are so valuable in the sector. The other thing as an investor is that because all of those players want things and have a very staged process themselves of running through R&D and developing products and commercializing products, they have specific stages where they like to capture that value. They have activities, and so even though the problems of the sector are that it costs a huge amount and takes a long time to get products to market, the rest of the ecosystem will support, fund, and will then help you monetize through partnerships, licensing deals, acquisitions through that process. Of course, the downside is this is hard, technically, and we can see it now through the whole COVID thing. It's not a slam dunk that you can come up with a vaccine quickly. It's not a slam dunk that you can take one of a whole range of potentially reprofiled drugs off the shelf, work out which one's going to work, and get it to work. It's not even a slam dunk that you can take something as well known and well established as PCR and use it quickly to come up with a diagnostic that a country needs. So that's some of the big picture stuff. And of course, we're in a world that's changing rapidly because of COVID, and COVID is yes, societal, but is a healthcare and a technical challenge. And the adoption of new technologies has been massively accelerated through the current seismic events. And these are both stimulating new thinking and change thinking. And actually that's something that's probably very good for innovators who are doing things that are non-conventional in the sector, like AI, like repurposing and reprofiling, like organ on a chip. And so that change thinking is happening both in corporates and in healthcare systems, and then that's filtering through to the investment continuum. So that's sort of my overall uptake view on this. I'd really like to talk a little bit, and I'd like to split this first of all into two stages. The first is that innovation discovery, how we come up with a new therapy, a new therapeutic, a new medicine. And I'd really, and how technology is changing that. And the question is, of course, how is technology changing that? And how are the large companies in the space reacting to the opportunities of that change? So I'll sort of hand over on the first instance to Xabi there, and he can tell us how AI in his space is impacting on that, and how those companies are reacting to it.
Sure, Andy. Thanks for the question. I think there's historically been, when we started and as we grew, there's been two topics that were really important for pharma and why it was really excited about, AI in general, even in the buzzwordy sense, impacting drug discovery. But now there's a third aspect that is of interest. So originally, obviously, one of the key things that AI can do and was hoped for is sort of generate novelty, right? Take data that's been generated, parse it in a way that humans couldn't, and come up with novel ideas for drug targets, biomarkers to pair those targets to patients, or ways to maybe ensure that those novel targets and eventually the compounds that are designed to bind them actually help and impact patients in a positive fashion in a long term, let's say on the long term, maybe staving off resistance, which is a huge topic especially in the field where we're most active, oncology. But then over time, the other major aspect and an aspect that has been really proven by AI, or like from the potential impacts of AI, is the impact on efficiency. No question there. If an AI can do something faster than humans can do, and maybe come up with and automate certain steps of the process, then that will save time and cost, which is super important in processes that are as costly and as lengthy as drug discovery, and especially in drug development. So that was the other aspect that pharma was really keen on. And an interesting third aspect now that's especially becoming super important in the light of COVID, and they're one of some of the advantages that we have, which I'll talk about in just a second, come up, is that actually if you're doing something computationally and doing certain steps of the process computationally, then that is not going to be impacted when your lab shuts down. So in a sense, now we have a unique new advantage because of the fact that all of the, let's say 99% of the experimentation that we do at Turbine is using our simulated cells as the experimental model, which are basically computational mathematical maps of the human cellular signaling processes, and they help us predict what would happen if you impacted and inhibited a given cell or cell colony or given tissue in a certain way. And obviously this is not something, since it's running in the cloud, this is not something that's going to be really impacted if we actually have to wait longer because we can't get the actual real experimental model of the tissue, the patient, into the experiment. So this is the thing that's of huge interest now to certain pharma partners. Obviously, previously they focused mostly on the efficiency saving and the cost saving aspect. And I think we as a field in general, I mean, AI in drug discovery and development, have been trying to push for the pharmaceutical industry to accept and acknowledge the potential novelty value that's being added, because obviously in biopharma, ultimately novelty is where the value accrues, because a novel therapy is where the value accrues and which will eventually impact patients and thus generate commercial value. So I think that's something that the field still has to work on, but in generally, obviously there's been some really great steps forward, Deep Genomics and a couple others launching Recursion and a couple others launching trials to prove that the drugs actually really work in patients. So over the next few years, we'll see the first true successes of AI in drug discovery being proven. On our end, with the stimulated cells, we also hope to get our first novel therapies that are targeted very specifically at given patient populations of high unmet medical need. We identify in the stimulated cells over the next few years. And luckily, COVID does impact us to some extent because of the actual experimentation we have to run to validate the predictions in the simulations, but the simulations themselves can continue apace.
So just a couple of questions. So do I understand it in terms of the way that pharma is changing or responding to this? It's been the preserve of those people who are early adopters and like novelty, but it seems to be shifting now to those who are having to rethink the way they run their process because the labs are shutting down. So it is opening up to a more, thinking to use of technology.
There's a different commercial logic that can apply to, that can be applied to why it makes sense to use more AI in the process in any step, really. That's completely right, yes.
Okay. So Ruchi?
So the COVID situation had made it very clear that the conventional testing methodologies are not good enough. So over a period of time, our ambition for developing organ-on-a-chip technology was for this purpose, that we get more quantitative data. We should be able to get real-time data. And it's very important for safety, because now if you look at the COVID, if you want to perform viral infectivity study, and that's where we have started to get interest as well now, because you cannot expose your team, your personnel to a pathogen which is highly infective, like COVID. You need a biosafety level 3 laboratory and everything. So that's where the value of the systems which can be automated and where your cell models can work for a considerable longer period of time, so that you're able to understand the way the viral load is happening, how the infectivity is happening. So that's where the value of our technology is. So for the last 2 years, we've been already looking at the pharmacogenetic angle of human drug response, because on drug metabolizing enzymes, cytochrome P450s, these differences have become over and over clear that there is huge difference in different age groups, different ethnic groups. But the way we develop drugs today, it's more of a hit and a trial. So more targeted approach can only be done by technology where you're able to create these human cell models. And again, as you were talking about AI, so the data is the core for any AI engine, right? So for creating this data, which is real, because better predictive modeling needs real data. You need to know the real receptors and how this response is happening, at what dose rate, how the binding is happening, what's the bioavailability. And this is the kind of data that we are generating. So this adds huge value to the situation that we have now, but how we progress further for vaccination development or even drug discovery.
And have you seen a material change in the way the technology is being seen? Have you seen a change in attitude to thinking about innovation?
Yes, it is, because if I just 2 years ago when I started, so people were skeptical that these models can actually be useful in terms of clinical interpretation. But now, as we show them data, we show them the cell, we show them the morphology, we look at the EC50s, the response, and that's where the excitement is coming up, because they see that where the conventional assay systems are happening. And we have done in parallel the cell line studies, the primary cells, as well as the cells that we have generated in our laboratory. So when we show that data, that's where the interest is coming up, and they're opening up towards adaptation of such technologies. So they want it to be quantified, to have an upscaled production, so that the methods, whether hit to screen, the early testing can be done on these models, because the idea is that it can be industrialized. So beyond the academic research, the value is added to this technology through compliance and taking it to an industrial scale.
Okay. So we'll come back to where all these technologies fit in, but that's the sort of discovery end of things. I'd like to move on to the development end of things and products. value in the sector has always been about product development and value capture. Of course, the challenge in development, almost unlike discovery. I mean, discovery, you're trying to discover something, but in development, one of the challenges in the sector is you hit these really tough days when you discover after a very expensive trial or study that something doesn't work. And that's one of the characteristics. Of course, there are various ways of trying to get around that. You can work on lower risk areas. You can work on areas that you feel are very well validated. You can work on known agents. And actually, we're lucky enough to have two people who are working on largely on known drugs or molecules which are known to work, and like to cover that a little bit. But actually, to try in the first instance to understand where the value in a new product is. And perhaps, Sarah, I'll ask you first. Why are products themselves so attractive for innovators, and where is the real value?
Yeah, I think for us, this is around, our core started off as a technology partnering business. So we built a technology platform. As I said, it was formulation technology. And so we started life partnering with pharma and biotech companies and using the technology platform to improve their products. And to a certain extent, that showed us and validated that technology worked, and there was a real need for the solutions that we could deliver, and drove us into developing products ourselves. So I think, as you said, we're taking existing products and improving those. So an example being insulin, which has been around for a very long time. And we're able to use our formulation technology to change the kinetics of that product. So we're making it very fast acting. And the reason this is important is that it helps people living with diabetes control their blood sugar, which is really the key here. So it leads to improved health outcomes. So I think the first thing and most important thing is to understand that you've got to be adding value. You've got to be generating a product or a profile that genuinely improves patient outcomes and or helps healthcare systems, because we all know there is increasing burden on healthcare systems, and paying for healthcare is a challenge. So, I mean, if we look at diabetes space, for example, 10% of the NHS budget per year is spent on treating diabetes and its complications. So if we can help those patients manage their disease and keep them healthier for longer and outside of the hospital setting, then of course it's good for the patient, but it's also good for the healthcare systems. But as a company to capture that value then, and this is, the decision we came to a few years ago, was that you need to be able to develop those products and do those value-added clinical studies yourself to demonstrate the value of the product and take them further towards ultimately the market. And to do that takes more risk, and more investment is required for that, but you can capture that value really. I'm sure Peter will talk about this. Now I realise I'm on the line with a patent attorney as well. IP is absolutely key. You've got to protect your innovation, and so that you can have valuable time on market where you have exclusivity. So thinking strategically and smartly about IP is really absolutely critical to that value capture. So once you have innovation, you can improve in therapeutic areas patient outcomes, you absolutely have to be able to IP protect it to be able to capture that value moving forward.
And Sarah, just on that IP front, and we'll come on to this, Peter, a little bit more. How much of your time when actually talking to pharma companies are you actually addressing IP as a sort of issue with them?
Yeah, I mean, a really significant amount of time is around, what IP do we have protecting the technology platform itself, and then when we're talking about specific products, whether it be we've improved theirs or we're talking about our products, it's around, have we protected it, have we got a picket fence of IP protection around that product, and will it stand up you know, because we all know, and we've seen it, probably the classic case is Humira, which is still the, you know, the biggest grossing revenue product in the world. I think it was just under $16 billion last year. AbbVie, you know, whether you like it or not, have done a great job and strategy there in IP protecting that. So they've blocked any biosimilars coming into the market until 2023 in the US, and you know, and are now performing life cycle management. This is actually formulation approaches to further block companies coming onto the market until 2027. So it shows how you can, through life cycle management as well, extend the lifetime of your product once it's on the market.
But something like insulin, known for years.
Yeah.
How do you protect that?
Yeah, no, it's true. So the actual product itself, so insulin ingredient is off patent, but we're protecting that by, you know, we're changing the kinetics of that. So there's clinical outcomes and kinetics that we have IP around. There's use of the product in various devices that's enabled, again, by the technology, again, that we protect. So we've got device related IP. But also the formulation of the product itself, although insulin itself is unchanged, the formulation that we're using, so the ingredients, final ingredients that we're mixing with the insulin, is novel and unique. So again, we've got formulation technology around that.
But surely someone could just faddle around with some different formulations and come up with something that was a little bit like it.
Yeah, and that's where the strategy comes into play. So, you know, when we're looking at, we'll be protecting the product very tightly, but then looking at all the space around that as well to prevent those workarounds. Looking at, okay, if I was sitting here wanting to copy this or do something similar, what would I do? That's one of the key elements of that thinking, and where you need to be really smart is, how do I protect this, but also protect something similar, different but similar, coming to market that's you know, would come alongside your product, which is essentially an extension of your innovation. So you have to protect the whole space.
Okay. So Peter, we'll come on to the patenting in a minute, but you know, Sarah's just talked about an area of huge medical need, which is diabetes. And I know that you're working in another area of enormous medical need, and perhaps you'd just like say a little bit about that, and then talk about how you develop, you know, what would be considered an unconventional product in that space, and again how you think about protecting it and why you do that. So Peter, you're on mute.
Thank you for pointing that out so rapidly. Usually people leave me a couple of minutes before helping me out. Yeah, we're working in mental health, developing a treatment for depression, and it is a huge unmet need. The latest figure is 322 million people worldwide suffering depression, lifetime prevalence of about 1 in 4, and a total cost to the world of about $1 trillion a year. So every way you look at it, mental health is a massive challenge, and you know, a lot of attention is being turned to COVID and the acute effects of that. There are concerns, you know, openly held concerns that a tidal wave of mental health challenges is going to follow COVID. So, you know, never has there been a more appropriate time to be working on something like this. The approach that we've taken is in some ways unconventional, although it's not without precedent in mental health. I mean, there are probably two different things that you could be referring to in terms of unconventionality. The first is that we're developing a scheduled substance. Dimethyltryptamine is a psychedelic. It is on the UN list of scheduled psychoactive substances and is banned in most countries in the world. The second unconventional approach could be the fact that we are developing a known molecule which is off patent. There is no way that we could prevent anyone from developing a competing medicine based on N,N-dimethyltryptamine. And so, does that have, you know, does that have any commercial teeth to it? Do the pharmaceutical partners that Andy was referring to before respect intellectual property based on a medicine of known origin. Andy, which of those two unconventional, are those the two unconventional approaches that you're referring to? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's you know, the unconventional nature is, yes, it's a scheduled psychoactive substance, which, you know, to everyone sounds a bit weird. Of course, the result of that is that actually in some ways there's quite a lot of knowledge about it and the pathways that it hits. And I mean, in a sense, what you're doing is being clever about looking at new understandings of pathways and applying them to a known drug. The second thing is it's not clear to everyone that you can actually protect and develop a product like that. And so it's both of those. Part of it's the unconventional thinking to get to the product. It's not gone through a 10-year drug discovery program to come out the other end. The second thing is then how you develop it and protect it and commercialize it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll deal with the fact that it's a Schedule 1 drug first, because I think it's actually a fairly simple, explanation. I mean, the way that the schedules to the Misuse of Drugs Act have been drafted are arcane, and they presume that a dangerous substance has no medical benefit without relying on scientific evidence. And so you get a catch-22 where a Schedule 1 drug is very, very difficult to research and will always remain in that presumption of lack of medical use. But on the other hand, any scheduled drug that has permeated the general population will typically have something compelling about it, be that recreational, therapeutic, or otherwise. And it's true that the flip side to a scheduled drug being difficult to research is that there are more things to find when you do, with a fair degree of certainty that you won't see anything terrible. I mean, dimethyltryptamine has been used for thousands of years in religious and therapeutic ceremonies as a component of a decoction called ayahuasca. And in that long history, not a single fatality or overdose has been reported. So that gives us a significant degree of confidence that we will be able to develop a new medicine that can pass phase 1 safety studies. And that saves us a huge amount of risk capital right from the get-go. And the second point on the scheduled issue is that there is precedent of scheduled drugs being placed into lower schedules, or for all intents and purposes removed altogether once a therapeutic application has been demonstrated. And of course, the burden of proof will be on us to show that that the medicine is worthy of rescheduling. But it's happened with ketamine, and it's happened with Sativex, and I see no reason why it shouldn't happen with either dimethyltryptamine or any of the other psychedelic compounds that are being developed by other biotechs in this space. Shall I move on to the patenting question?
Very briefly, Peter, if that's all right, because I'd like to get to questions. And I notice that from everyone there's some questions coming in. Please keep your questions coming in. I'm going to come to those. I, of course, have a stack of my own questions, but I'd rather be asking everyone else's. So, Peter, if you'd just like to touch on the patenting bit.
Well, look, I will try and be very quick. So, as you rightly pointed out, for decades now, Big Pharma have been outsourcing early stage drug development to smaller companies for a myriad of reasons that I won't go into. And that has brought with it a bit of a trend away from wanting to own the molecule or own the mechanism behind the molecule, into a willingness to simply own the medicine, own the product. And there's very good reason for that. A platform and a product are very, very different. They've each got benefits and they've each got weaknesses. And one of the benefits of a product over a platform is it's much easier to value. a platform offers so much potential, but very little kind of hard value to to calculate from the perspective of a buyer. So it is always useful to have a product to showcase your platform. We don't have a platform. We only focus on the product, and specifically we focus on the makeup of the medicine, and any invention that we encounter on the road to developing the medicine is potentially patentable. The real trick is identifying those patents which sit directly on the value chain. So it's no good protecting a solid dosage form which can easily be designed around by a generic. On the other hand, there is every point in protecting a specific pharmacokinetic profile of your medicine, be it based on insulin or DMT or whatever, because that specific PK profile will deliver value and will deliver benefit to a subset of the patients to whom it will be applied. So my kind of one quick soundbite would be, make sure that you're protecting something that sits very, very clearly on the value chain towards the market.
Yeah, Peter, thanks. I just give and I know that, I mean, your point about pharmacokinetic profiles, pharmacodynamic profiles is really good. And I know Sarah would never go into as much detail as she perhaps could, but having the fastest insulin that anyone has ever seen in a clinical situation has allowed some smart claims around that. And just for everyone's input, if anyone's sort of slightly skeptical about this field, I suggest you have a look at the leading Biogen multiple sclerosis medicine, Tecfidera. Now, Tecfidera, which is making, which is currently selling for Biogen, I think about $4.5 billion. It may be more than that now. Tecfidera is a molecule called dimethyl fumarate. Dimethyl fumarate's been known since about 1910. It's been used as a fire retardant in furniture and therefore made in tanker load quantities. It was a drug in Europe used as a drug in Europe at various situations since the 1950s, but Biogen have managed, well, actually rather some innovators managed, and then Biogen bought it off them for an absolute fortune, managed to both demonstrate and protect that the molecule was of real use in multiple sclerosis, and now it's really doing good and making Biogen a huge amount of money. Anyway, I'm interested in questions from people. So I will come back to other people, but in first instance, Peter Higgins, welcome Peter, has asked the question. I'll read the questions out rather than handing over to people. Peter's question is, in April, health techs raised 1.2 billion in venture capital funding, a 9.7% increase on the same month a year earlier, according to PitchBook. During the same month, venture capital investments across all verticals shrank from 18.4 billion down to 23.8 billion a year, down from 23.8 billion a year earlier. Does this mean that health tech is finally on the radar of larger VCs? So I'll throw an answer to that in the first instance. So I think health tech has been on the radar of large major VCs for a long time. I just think what you're beginning to see is a reallocation of capital across that, and particularly into areas that really match the sort of COVID type crisis. So stuff that's happening in telemedicine, remote healthcare medicine, of course, and then into the more heavy end of life sciences, vaccines and things is really happening. I think the challenge for health tech, as someone who has done a number of health tech companies and is deeply passionate about the space, is that there is a challenge that a lot of stuff in health tech doesn't classically fit the business model and the metrics that tech VCs expect, and doesn't classically fit the metrics and models that classic therapeutic life science VCs, and it's taken a while for a sort of new thinking about actually what the business models are, what the important metrics are. Almost everything in healthcare, sales cycles are slow, regulation is an important barrier, but also slows things down. And so it's been, consumers are involved, but less. But consumers are rarely involved directly by themselves. So I think there are complexities there, but I think there is a big shift. There's absolutely no doubt that health tech companies at the moment that are involved with remote care, telemedicine, mental health, testing, monitoring are being sought by major VCs. And of course, if you're in real heavy life sciences and have things that are involved as antivirals and or as in the vaccine space, those are being looked at. I hope that sort of answers that question. Does anyone else want to step in on that?
I mean, I'd happily add that I certainly agree that right now the way tech companies are valued is completely different to the way the biotechs are valued, and until that changes, I think we're going to see two completely different pools of capital. On the other hand, there are sectors, and possibly healthcare is one of them, where an investor could start to look at the potential of a product in terms of cost of acquisition of customer and lifetime value. And when you can measure by those metrics, then perhaps tech investors will start to take some interest. Okay.
And just sort of following on a bit from that, and the discussion that we had on new product, patents and products. William Baines, hi William, again, wonderful player on in the Cambridge biotech scene. William asks, Peter and Andy comment that pharma is looking for products with a robust patent portfolio protecting it. Yes. My experience of early stage investors is that they still want mechanism, basic biology, etc. Is there a real disconnect or a reflection that at early stage they do not yet have a product? So Peter, do you, Peter or well, whoever, Zabi, Ruchi, you're doing stuff on a chip screening, which I guess could be used for phenotypic screening. What's your thoughts on the sort of disconnect between finding a product and having an understanding of mechanism and basic biology?
Go ahead, Ruchi.
So in terms of patenting and biology, both are important, because as we started building our organ-on-a-chip technology, I think it's a broader understanding that anything that's microfluidics being patented. But that's not true, because when you start to look at a particular kind of response that comes from biology, how you have cultured your cells, what kind of assay it is, it's an endpoint assay, it's a long-term modeling. So there is a lot of scope where things can be patented, and that's the approach we have used. We patented our technology, we worked on it, and we looked at during examination of a patent. So we looked at the technologies which have been earlier, where people have put in broader technologies which are not in the market. They don't have potential to be commercialized. So this is the value, to understand the patent and biology both together in the context of how this technology will be commercialized. So I think it needs that kind of understanding from the innovator and the time from the investor to see where the commercial potential lies and where the future is of the technology when both come together.
Yeah, I mean, from our side, what we've seen is we build a model of biology that can tell us the, let's say, footprint or fingerprint of a successful drug, but doesn't tell us anything about its composition. Initially, we struggled a lot when designing the business model with how do you monetize biology, but actually we realized something that I believe Peter alluded to, which is actually ultimately a lot of the things that are, a lot of the IP that is on the value chain in biopharma does have to do ultimately with biology, because you need to understand the mechanisms that may be targeted by a successful drug, and also you need to be able to clearly select, especially oncology, the right patient population and link your therapeutic target or compound to a given patient population of high unmet medical need. And both of those are actually they do have to do mostly with biology. So as long as we get to, let's say, picket fence, as I believe Sarah said, the right patient population and the mechanisms that actually are needed to be inhibited and perturbed in order to really help that and impact that patient population, then, which are all things that are coming out of our simulations and that we've shown we can claim IP around, then suddenly, let's say, having the right modulator of that mechanism, the right compound, is basically almost, let's say, something that you can get as a service, and there you can get it as a service, but it's basically the tool that you use to achieve the desired effect, but it's really the effect that is holding the value.
Is it
actually? I'm going to address another question on patents, which I feel very strongly about, actually. And then there are some great questions coming in on investors. Question from Jurek Sikorski. Jurek, hi, great to have you online. As an investor and a founder of Henley Business Angels, there are many factors I take into account in deciding where to invest. IP features prominently, and I look for strong IP, e.g. granted patents, and IP strategy of actively creating, protecting, exploiting, and defending an IP, and an experienced IP specialist who advises the company. What advice with respect to IP would Andy give a startup preparing to raise seed finance? So I do have some advice on this, and my advice would be this. I'm afraid so many people get into the mode that patenting is about sort of some piece of scientific proof. It's not. It's a commercial tactic. It's a defense tactic. It's an offense tactic. And so often people sit down, do some science, come up with something interesting, and then ask the question, how do I patent that? Rather than ask the question, what do I want to protect, and how do I gather the data to protect it? I'm always encouraging startups to sit down, write the patent claims that they would like, that actually are offensive and really protect their area, and then do work and experiments and activity that generates the claim sets they want, rather than randomly wandering around inventing things and waiting to patent. Another comment I would make on this is, I think that that in the UK, there's this rather gentlemanly approach to this, which does sort of try and make it a sort of technocratic thing rather than a very commercial thing. And the number of times I've known IP specialists in the UK say, oh, no, you can't do that. And then when you take a patent out and show it as being the claim sets that's been generated by a aggressive US company with aggressive US patent attorney, they go, oh, they should never have got away with that. And the point is, they did. Peter, would you like to say anything on that?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, I completely agree with the advice that you give about writing your target claims. I mean, this is a very interesting topic. I think, you know, this could be relevant to everyone on the call. In drug development, there is a very, very commonly used document called a target product profile. You know, there is an analog of that in intellectual property, which you can refer to as the target IP profile, which virtually no one ever writes. Virtually no one ever writes it. And if you make sure that your target product profile and your target IP profile start in alignment and remain in alignment, then you are pretty sure that you will always have your most robust coverage. I mean, this is an approach that we've developed. We have helped some other companies in this space, including Foremost and Benevolent AI, to apply it to some of their programs. And I mean, any product-focused biotech startup should be thinking in terms of target IP profile.
Okay, great. Sarah, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I would say is, as well, advice would be to really take the time to think about it and be creative. Exactly as you say, it's not a afterthought of, oh, I've done this, how could I directly patent protect that? We spend a lot of time at ArrowCore, you know, brainstorming IP, looking at other IP that's out there as well, but as well looking at that to see what's out there, but not being constrained by that. I think you've got to think around, okay, is there a more innovative approach here to IP that we can use? And it doesn't really matter if that path hasn't been trod before. We do also have, and I would advise people, and it was probably to your point, Andy, we have internal specialists and we brainstorm and we have innovation internally, but we use European and US patent attorneys, and we do see that difference between not necessarily ambition, but what they in the US, what they will agree we can go for versus Europe. And then it ends up being, we get them all on the line together and have conversation around that, because there are many claims out there. We look at them and say, how on earth did they get that? But they did. So I think you've got to aim for those ambitious, broader claims, and there's mechanisms all the way through the process to narrow as needed. But if you start narrow, it's, that's a difficult place to get out of.
I've got some questions here. I'm going to move away from the patenting field, as much as I love it, and go on to a bit on some investment questions that are there. First question from Tan: will Cambridge and UK investors match the speed of US-based investors when it comes to assessment of promising startups, and be able to write large enough checks to stop UK startups shifting to the US? So let's just have a brief discussion about UK investors versus US investors, about the pace of investment, which actually I think is a real issue here. Who's got, who wants to handle that? Zabi, do you want to say something about pace of investment? I know some of us have got scars in that, and maybe I'll come to those who have got scars in a minute. But Zabi, do you want to say something about, and you're dealing with sort of UK investors, but you've also got international investors involved with you, haven't you?
Yeah, we do. We have actually spent a lot of time in the US over the past couple of years, especially because obviously most of the funding is available in the US, and most of the funding that is, let's say, well informed on our space in general, be that AI and drug discovery or computational biology in general. So what we've seen, definitely, and caveat here, we did not yet close with a US VC in the past, so I can't speak from direct experience. But what we've seen is US VCs have been better, I think, at saying even no, which is obviously, as a founder, sometimes really what you ultimately want, just a clear picture of where you stand. I think we've definitely seen them move faster on that front, and also be bolder, but I guess it's no surprise to anybody.
Anyone else wants to handle that one? I've got views. Sarah, do you want to?
In terms of the
pace of the speed of investors, and is the speed of investment and the scale of investment in the UK something that holds us back?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think, as we talk about that value capture and taking products further in development to capture those value and to, ensure that you're not in a position where you need to do a partnering deal early at a lower value, of course, requires investment. And it's true, and everybody on the call knows this. The magnitude of investment between, say, the UK or Europe and the US, there's still a disconnect there. But I think, partly it's a push for the ambition of UK companies, and that ambition to move further in development will also help to push and pull investors along. We can go out and gain investments, from the US or perhaps China, etc., as well, as we see money coming in as well from the East now. So I think, we shouldn't get tied up with thinking it's impossible to do. It's difficult. It's slow, I would say. But I think what we're seeing, and as you know, we're just starting on a new fundraise as well ourselves, and started those early conversations, is that we are seeing investors and perhaps those larger VCs or more generalist investors are looking now at healthcare and life sciences, partly because of COVID and the resilience of the sector as well. So hopefully we'll see from that more investment coming into the healthcare and life sciences sector as well.
You know, and to be honest, pitching by Zoom is a real international leveler.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come on to that, to addressing Rowan Gardner's question. Rowan, hi. How are syndicates being organised to deploy capital in our current COVID normal? If there is a reallocation of capital towards health tech from other sectors, how is capital identifying and transacting on a largely remote basis? You know, I think I'm in a situation where I've got 5 companies who are fundraising at the moment. You know, several of them have got term sheets in the last week, so stuff is going on. Is it going on at quite the same pace? So I think the processes are slightly different. I think there are challenges. I think there are particular challenges for lots of early VCs where actually being in a room with a founder makes a real difference of understanding who they are. I think if you're really well organized and you're not at that stage, I think it is possible to, and as I said, in some ways geographically normalizing to be able to do this stuff by Zoom with a good data room and be very responsive on Q&A. But any thoughts from anyone else on that would be great.
Yeah, Andy, I think you're right in that, you know, the building of that personal relationships. If it's investors that don't know you and you're building that relationship from scratch, then obviously there are some difficulties with that. But as you said, I think everybody's embracing the technology. We see it today on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and it means that perhaps those investors that would have expected you to be in the room with them, you know, perhaps they're in the East or in the US, you can have those calls and those interactions over you know, video conferencing now. So to a certain extent you can get out to more people more easily. So, you know, we're in the early days of that, so we'll see, but certainly, you know, in people engaging, it doesn't appear to be a problem at this stage, but you have got to be well organized. I think what we'll see is that there maybe be more in-depth due diligence because there's a little less of that gut feel, I've spent a long time getting to know this person and I trust them piece. So perhaps there'll be more detailed due diligence that comes out the back end.
Okay. And just on that for everyone, going beyond the investor world, how's business development and discussions with corporates and customers changing? Ruchi, do you want to just come in first on that?
Yes, of course, because for last 1 year, we had all these interactions, and this was the time when we were about to market launch. We were going to meet quite a few people in these months, and now it's been postponed, the strategy. But obviously, because the relationships we build, so it's again, everybody's waiting that as soon as we have better clarity on the lockdown and thing, and we resume the discussions, we have the Zoom meetings and things going on. But it's again, in pharma, it's the personal interaction that makes the final deal. So the situation does have an impact, but obviously it will recover as soon as we are out of the situation.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, Andy. It's been brilliant, and I wanted it to carry on, but I know that...
Oh, come on. So, Sunil, I'm just going to leave you with that to answer that question to start with. You know, you do as much of this stuff, both with investors and corporates, as anyone else. Has it really... I mean, it certainly hasn't slowed down to a stop. Would you say it was slower? Would you say it's changed? Would you say it's different?
I think it's definitely different. Biotech investors are still very active, unusually. I mean, I've seen lots of other sectors get decimated. People are definitely more cautious, and they're looking for, you know, more due diligence than they may have done earlier, and they're more active about people that they know in the deals. If they know someone who's there already, they're more likely to come in. I think it's harder to make new cold relationships from scratch. So people are investing in people that they know, or people that they know are investing. So I think that will be the difference. But I think in general, it's a very active community still. And corporates are still, the balance sheets of the big pharma, which is essentially driving all of this, are very much intact.
And their share prices have done well in the current situation, and that's why there is at top level a big allocation of capital. All right, so Sunil, thank you. Hope that was all right. And anyone, if you've got further questions, and I know I haven't answered everyone's, if they want to pass them along through the O2h network. And Sunil, thank you for setting these things up, and hope everyone has a great weekend.
Well, Andy, thank you and all the panelists. It's been, I normally cut it at 45, but it was so good. I couldn't make myself do it. And I just wanted to hear the answers as much as everybody else listening did as well. So it was a great session. Appreciate that. I'm going to ask you all one last thing just before we wrap up. And I'll just then mention what we're doing next week. But some of you are active in your fundraising right now. If you could just say one sentence about where you are with your funding raising and what you're looking for.
Sure. Ruchi?
Yeah, so we're just starting a Series A. So we will be sending our deck out to investors very soon. So it's a start of our Series A. And we are raising 1.5 million, yeah.
Sarah, I guess?
So we're just kicking off a fundraise. This is to support the further development of our diabetes products. So we've got 2 products in our diabetes franchise, and also to take our anti-infective products into the clinic. And we'll be looking to raise around 15 to 20 million pounds sterling.
Zambi?
Peter, let's have Peter.
Okay.
So we're, I guess, going live on our Series A. It's been kind of running, it's under the, under the surface until now. We're raising $5 million US to transition from our preclinical asset into the clinic. We're expecting to submit our clinical trial application in September, and we're looking to close the Series A around about that time as well.
Zabi?
Great. We're also actually kicking off pre-Series A because we have a great syndicate that we put together last year, among them Sunil's group as well. And we've now built an entire drug discovery workflow and early development workflow built on our simulations, and we've uncovered the first 6 targets that we actually want to progress through this. So we're raising 3 to 5 million to actually get to a number of in vivo value inflection points for some of these targets, and then also partner with a few large pharma companies to co-develop a few other assets as well.
Thank you very much to all the panelists, especially Andy, because it was a really well facilitated session. And thank you to all the panelists. Next week, our session is small biotech and big pharma. And we have only 2 guests, but we have Johnson & Johnson, J&J, who did a fairly significant collaboration with a small biotech called Extonate. And we have VP head at J&J who actually championed the deal within Johnson & Johnson, along with Catherine Beach, CEO of Extonate. So I am really excited at that panel session facilitating that. I think it'll be another good one. And until then, thank you very much and goodbye.
Cheers, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Andy.
Good weekend.
Standing back.